Indian and Chinese troops, briefly in fact, has a physical confrontation on the line of actual control in Arunachal Pradesh. This map that you see, this is the Tawang area, and here in Arunachal Pradesh at the LAC, what we have been told is on December 9, both the troops of India and China came face to face. Now, government sources have said that the face-off took place on December 9th, and this is after some physical clashes, fists. In fact, it was hand-to-hand combat, and what we are being told is 9 Indian soldiers, few in fact Chinese soldiers also have sustained injuries. Now, minor injuries have been reported on both sides, and the two sides have immediately disengaged from this area. This is what the sources are telling us. The face-off took place in the Tawang sector of Arunachal Pradesh, according to the sources, and this is at the line of actual control, which is contested by the Indian soldiers in a firm and resolute manner. Now, this is what the government is telling us. But remember, this is the first big clash between the Indian and Chinese forces on the line of control since Galwan incident took place in 2020. That is what the worrying point is. The face-off on Friday, in fact, that took place on December 9. Minor injuries have been resulted on both sides, have been reported on both sides. And like I told you earlier, both sides have disengaged. But this happened, and the inside story of what sources are in fact telling us happened when there was a larger than usual Chinese patrol party which came onto the Indian side. When they were challenged, when they were stopped, this resulted in a hand-to-hand combat situation in which these injuries took place. Thankfully, no weapons were used this time. Let me very quickly at this moment for more go across to my colleague Vishnu Shom, who is joining us with more details on this. Vishnu, over to you. Just give us a sense of what happened on December 9 and the repercussion of this clash between Indian and Chinese troops.
Well, the incident which took place north of Tawang is in an area where a large number of Chinese soldiers, we are told, even though that number itself remains unclear, they came in contact with the line of actual control, in other words, what is known as the McMahon line in Arunachal Pradesh. So they may have narrowly breached it, but there was a large presence of Indian soldiers. This is one of the most militarized areas or militarized parts of Arunachal Pradesh. So when this Chinese team was actually crossing over the line of actual control or came close to it, there was an Indian squad, a group of Indian soldiers, a patrol of Indian soldiers who intercepted them, and there were clashes which took place. There have been injuries on both sides. What we have learned is that the injuries are minor injuries, and that the incident itself was diffused as a result of meetings which took place between local military commanders, which is very much what the protocol is. But what is significant is that, to my understanding, it is the first time that there have been physical clashes between Indian and Chinese soldiers since August 2020. And those clashes took place in Ladakh on the South Pangong Lake side. And that itself took place after Galwan. Galwan, of course, was an altogether different scenario when 14 Chinese soldiers, when several Indian soldiers lost their lives, and at least 4 Chinese soldiers were killed in action, but we know that most likely many more were also killed. So the point is this: it's a contentious line of actual control, or in the case of Arunachal Pradesh, it's known as the McMahon line, also the LAC. It's confused, the line is confused, the Chinese have claims, we have claims, and when something like this happens, there is a certain protocol. There is a display of banners by the Chinese and by us saying this is our territory, go back. And after this banner drill, there's a protocol whereby soldiers on both sides do go back. And that's how the issue is dealt with. But obviously on this occasion, and as we've seen on quite a few other occasions in the past, there were scuffles which actually broke out. And in these scuffles, the Chinese sustained injuries, in as much as Indian soldiers possibly did. But fortunately, that situation has been diffused. It's not grown to become anything else, but I think it's fair to assume that that there is tension along the line of control, certainly in eastern parts of the country.
And what does this tension mean? Vishnu, thank you for joining us with that. What does this tension mean, and how is it going to play out in the next few days? To discuss that very quickly, going across to Mr. Suresh K. Goyal, former diplomat and Secretary, Minister of External Affairs in India. We also have Lieutenant General Raj Kadyan, former Deputy Chief of Army Staff, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, Director of Society for Policy Studies, defense expert, also joining us this evening. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us here on Verified. I want to start by asking you, Lieutenant General Kadian, this has happened, after a long time. There has been series of meetings which have been going on to decrease tension along the line of actual control and the perceived lines for India and China. How do you now see this playing out, this incident of violence between both the Chinese and the Indian troops in the days to come?
The problem between India and China is that the border is not marked. The area is very difficult. It is not possible to identify each nala and stone and hillock which belongs to whom. But there has been an understanding from 2006 onwards that we patrol up to our claim line and the Chinese patrol up to their claim line. In the last 17 years, there had been no clash. The feature where the clash took place on 9 December is a Ganse feature about 35 kilometers northeast of Tawang. Chinese apparently came and occupied it, and it is in the Indian claim line, so Indians objected to it. That led to a clash. There may have been some firing. I'm not sure if there was no firing, but there's no fatality. There would have been injuries, but there's no fatality, which is a good thing. And both sides, the commanders met on the ground, and the problem was resolved. But this is not the last time that these clashes will take place. They have taken place in the past. China has shown no interest in converting the LAC into the international border, which India has been wanting. Once that is done, then there will be border marking, there will be pillars, and it will be clear which area belongs to whom.
Okay.
But Chinese, obviously, they have a long-term plan. They have never recognized Arunachal to be part of India. They claim that this is southern part of Tibet.
Right.
Similarly, Ladakh, they call it western part of Tibet. So these two areas, they will never accept the international border. The army has been doing a wonderful job, but army can only control the local situation.
Right.
They cannot solve the problem between the two countries. That has a larger dimension, diplomatic, economic, political. I'm sure the government is working on it. But this incident by itself, which may not be the last one, has been controlled at the local level. It was not allowed to be escalated.
But you're right there that this may not be the last one. And Mr. Goyal, I want to bring you in on this. What are the options as far as the government of India is concerned? We saw some very, measured steps being taken by the government of India after the Galwan incident took place. Now, what are the options on the table as far as the Indian government is concerned post this incident, sir?
Ankit, it's a very complex question that you're putting up to me. What are the options before the government of India? Now, these situations, the way they actually develop, the options also change the way they develop. Therefore, it's not possible to state at a given point of time that these are the options that we have and we will exercise these options. We have to really keep on watching the situation and go from point of time to the other point of time if there is any change and so on and so forth. Now, my understanding really is that, first of all, the border in the eastern sector was never settled really. It has been stable. It has been quiet, I would say, ever since 1962, and then minor incidents here and there, and they have taken place all the time. But it has been rather quiet, and therefore an impression has been created that this has become now actually the international border between India and China, but it is not. It is still contested. China has never agreed to the McMahon line, though the fact is that we have thought that in an eventual settlement, Chinese would agree on the McMahon line as the international border, some give and take here and there, etc., and with some settlement in the Ladakh as an overall package.
Right.
However, the point really is that what we thought earlier and what actually may be changing are two different things now. Tawang particularly is important for China because Tawang also has the largest Tibetan monastery there. It has a particular association with succession to Dalai Lama. And for China, succession is an important political issue because if they accept the traditional way of appointing Dalai Lama or selecting Dalai Lama, they give up the control over the Tibetan processes.
Right.
And they cannot. So it's a very complex issue, but my sense is that it probably could be giving a message that, look, our claim is still there.
Yeah.
So don't think that everything is hunky-dory. And number two, not to let Dalai Lama be, resting that everything is going to be okay. So the challenge will continue.
Challenge will continue, and Komodo Bhaskar, in that aspect, when it might not be the last incident, we have only seen in the last couple of years Chinese aggression increasing on the line of actual control and on the contentious part. Does it have anything to do with what is happening inside China right now as well? A lot of unrest was reported due to the COVID restrictions. President Xi's, new term has also begun. Is there a message somewhere, or at least a distraction that Chinese leadership wants to create with such incidents?
Ankit, I would say that the historical record of what happened in the past is always a useful indicator, especially when we are dealing with the kind of complex issues that my co-panelists have already referred to. So I think you're right in drawing attention to the domestic situation within China, because we are aware that after President Xi Jinping, his term has been extended now, what seems to be like for an indefinite period, he has had to deal with the protests because of the COVID pandemic and what happened within his country. Now, there is a sense of deja vu of 1962, that if you recall the run-up to October 1962, at that time, Chairman Mao was also dealing with a number of issues which could be broadly described as domestic discord, and some of it was also seen as a challenge to him and his own, shall we say, grip on power at that point in time.
Right.
So we had October 1962. Now, I'm not suggesting a parallel. I keep saying that history rhythms, it may not repeat. But I think this is significant that there has been this kind of an incident where it's now being termed as a minor clash. Apparently, no ordnance is used according to the latest reports. To me, it's cause for concern. Particularly, I think when we felt that there was some kind of a rapprochement at the political level.
Okay.
India and China. And that seemed to be the signal that was being, at least, I think, the subtext of what was being conveyed in Delhi after India assumed the presidency of the G20. Now, if you put all of this together,
right,
I would say that for India, the fact that Arunachal again simmering is cause for concern, and the response. My sense is we'll even have more news in the next few days, Ankit. I think this is not the full story, because if the incident took place on December 9th,
right,
and you in the media are reporting it on December 12th, this is drip feed by the government of India, because they think that this is a sensitive security issue, and no reporter broke the story. So obviously there is a kind of, I would say, regulated dissemination.
Absolutely.
Which in itself is cause to me for some unease. Why should India in 2022 be doing something that we did in 1962, which is not to inform the country about what has happened? To me, that's cause for concern.
It is a cause of concern. Tensions are high, and as our esteemed panelists, in fact, were telling us that this heightened sense of alertness and much more seems to be coming out, or possibly will come out in the days to come. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on Verified with your views on the current situation on the border between India and China.